Hello, Internet. How are we doing today? From me to you, I want to give you that space and I want to give you the validation while we sit here and ask ourselves, how are we doing? Oh, I have a male therapist, you guys. I never thought in my whole existence I would ever say that. I would ever say that. Like, I almost think something's wrong with me. I think a lot of things are fucking wrong with me. But that is one of them today that we're going to talk about. I'm going to talk about a few, I think. But that's major unos, what we're going to talk about. I have been in therapy really since I was 7 years old, because I lost my dad when I was 7. So I quickly got into therapy, and I've kind of consistently on and off have been in therapy ever since, maybe taking a year or two off. Most recently, it's my biggest break. And so I also feel like therapy is I'm pretty open to it. I was going to say second nature, but I don't necessarily want to say that. I think really what I would try to articulate in saying that is just like, this has been a constant through my whole life, so I'm not necessarily scared of it. And I think I understand the system of it. I understand the language of it. And so I feel like I definitely need somebody to meet me where I'm at. I'm not fresh enough to meet somebody in their game, really, like to say that pretty straightforwardly. So I and I say that too because I had taken a year off, a couple years off, I think about 2.5 years of therapy, because I think there also comes a point where you build a relationship with your therapist and it just starts to even keel and kind of like flatline a little bit. And that's what was happening. I just wasn't really getting the support that I needed, and I wasn't in an environment anymore to give myself that, because I knew the game that I was playing. And bless her soul, I've learned so much from that therapist. So I took some time off and my insurance changed. So most recently, I think what is October, I put myself on wait list in April, and then, it kind of opened up over the summer. And so I got that ground rolling, and I put myself in a lot of different programs, because when you're trying to find services like that, you just gotta play the system. And so I interviewed with a couple therapists, and, majority of them were women. But I felt like some of the institutions where I was finding therapy, there was just so much bureaucracy. And I needed the system to meet me where I was at. I didn't want to be in a system where I was meeting the system where it needed to be met at. In the sense of like, I need talk therapy. I want the therapy to be surrounded around my initial needs. I don't want to necessarily work on quote unquote goal. I think goal-oriented therapy for people who are just getting exposed to it, or maybe a little fresh, and are still building their relationship to it, I think you can kind of use that and it benefit you. But for somebody like me, who's kind of been a vet doing this a majority of my life, I need more than that, and maybe there will be other times in my life where I can focus on goal-oriented therapy, but right now I need somebody to help me figure out my brain. And that's not just going to happen in this one goal. That would have been way too hard for me. So emphasize this too, of this, I'm also going into these interviews, and I'm meeting these therapists, and this one woman literally clocked the shit out of me and was like, do you hide behind your knowledge and don't show emotion? First and foremost, like, why the fuck would you say that to somebody you've never talked to before? I understand that sometimes therapy needs to clock you. I understand that sometimes you need to be like, hey, see what you're doing. But you're going to do that the first time you meet me when I'm obviously telling you, showing you, hey, I know this language. I know the system. I need somebody to meet me where I'm at. And for you to just like, it just didn't make me feel good. And I think when I met with this man therapist, it was great energy. And that's really wild to me. Like, even a couple years ago, I feel like it would have brought tears to my eyes thinking that I'd have to talk to a man about my shit. Like, it's kind of crazy that I'm here. And I really enjoy him because he still makes me figure it out for myself. Like, I think there's power in that too, of like, you know, answering me with a question, like making me do the work. Like, and I think that's really important and really grounding. And this week, we were really talking about me as an individual and as a person giving more than I get. And I grew up in an addict household. I mean, my parents met in AA. So if that doesn't kind of paint this picture for you, I was just adultified really young. And I think there's a lot of complexities to that above death in my family and just being my dad's only kid. So kind of only being the only grandchild that like lived where my whole family lived, and being my dad's daughter. I think I was just had a lot of expectations, and being the glue, being the person that held everybody together. And I think I experienced that even at a really young age. And so giving more than I get is so almost second nature for me, unfortunately. And I also, in my 25 years of life, have been going through a lot of changes. And I have kind of lost everything that I've known. Or I've given it up, or I've set some really crazy boundaries to be like, hey, you can't treat me like that. And because when that happens, people walk away. And I also don't want to like sit here and paint the picture of like, oh, I'm a victim, because I'm not. I think at first it was really hard. And I think at first I kind of felt like, what's wrong with me if like all of my really close relationships are falling apart? What am I doing? What am I doing to perpetuate this, right? How am I allowing this to happen, right? And I think this piece of like giving more than I was getting is the biggest part of it. Because I didn't understand it. And I've even lost people that I thought I was going to have in my life forever. And I think I have a lot of anger around that. But I realized, you know, then stepping away from those emotions and looking at everything, I realized, oh, wow, like these signs were actually there. I just wasn't awake enough to let myself see it. So it's like, okay, what does that mean? Like, what does it mean I'm giving more than I'm getting? I think I was showing up for people in a way that the people that I was surrounded around couldn't show up for me. And I realized that I was operating that way because they couldn't. And I think I used their capacity as an excuse almost. Well, they can't. Well, they weren't raised like me. Well, they didn't have the same values as me growing up, or expectations, or, you know, they weren't in an environment where they understood certain boundaries. And I realized I was just making these crazy excuses, or, you know, it's like being there for somebody in a really, really hard time. But when I'm mentally struggling and have to prioritize myself, there isn't acknowledgement or space to accept that. And that's really painful. And it's really interesting that I'm telling you all this, and in my experience, that it kind of, I don't want to say took this man therapist, but it's this man therapist said that shit to me. Like, holy fuck, like that is crazy. And I think it's also with this, I'm sharing this experience too, because it's like, you really don't know until it happens or until you do it. It's like the one thing that you think, oh, like that would never help me. That would never give me what I would need. That would never, put me in a position to understand what's really happening in my life. Like, obviously it's not just because he's a dude, but I think it's the conversations that are happening at play and also my life. But I think when you grow really, really close to a therapist and they know you, sometimes it doesn't work in your favor. And other times when you maybe don't have that closeness of a relationship, there is a little bit more raw truth. And I think also I'm removed enough to understand, oh, wow, this person didn't have my best interest at heart. Oh, wow. Walking through the relationships and step by step of how life changes and relationship changes, you really understand this person never was thinking about me. And that's really hard. Like 3 of my closest friends, and it's also really interesting too, because it's like, I'm on every side of the seesaw. And that's also a really interesting perspective too. And I feel like I've kind of like gone over a little bit about what's happening in my life personally and like these friendship breakups, but I've also realized too that I am the type of person where I will just have one friend. I'll just have one friend and that'll be it. That'll be good enough for me. And in a lot of these relationships, that is what happened. And I was talking to somebody today, not my therapist, but I was talking to an esthetician and who did my facial. That's why I'm a glowy, glowy girl today. She was telling me about one of her relationships with a friend and that it was really based on a fear bond. And that really was like, oh, ding, 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 ding. Hello. I think we always talk about trauma bonds and blah, 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 blah. But also this fear bond, this like fear bond of like we're friends based off of fear or like having to cut the cord. And that also I think is such a huge theme. Like, and I can see that from my other friends' perspective. I can see that from even my perspective in certain relationships. Like, and I think it's hard when we're in a time of really like loneliness than I think ever before. And I think like the rise of technology and AI and all these things that like really can manipulate our insecurities. I think it's really easy to fall into those sort of bonds, even if you know that this isn't aligned for you. And that it's painful. Like this is really painful stuff. This is grieving. Grieving relationships is difficult. And I think, I'm not close to anybody from who I went to high school with. I'm not close to anybody who I went to middle school with. Like I felt like, oh my God, like, do I not know how to be friends with people? Like, do I not know how to build relationships? Like, I think it made me really sad because I really prided myself. And I think I know that I'm a genuine good person. But if I give my all at the first minute, I'm not setting myself up for a foundational relationship because like 1, I'm going to be ending up operating from an empty cup. 2, along the same lines, it's like if you give your all at one moment, you're not going to have anything to give later. And I don't think that's necessarily what happened, but I think that also personally for me set me up to lose myself, because then I fell into the caretaker role than really operating from my own personal aura. And I don't think I've given myself a chance to do that in my relationships, because I've unfortunately surrounded myself by people that needed to be fixed. And I think that's understandable coming from my childhood background, right? Than being kind of forced to be around addicts, and that was my environment. Like my parents met in AA, but I grew up in a bar because my grandma owned a bar. Like, make it make sense. Like, every juxtaposition was in front of me. So being the helper and the problem solver was my validation. And I think that there are good qualities in that. I don't want to diminish those qualities. And I don't, in my healing journey and reconnecting with myself, I don't want to shit on that part of myself, because that is such a solid part of myself. But I'm also learning how to give that to the right people and when. That can't be what defines me. And I think that's part of the reason why I feel so burned from all these relationships. I'm like, wow, I was there for you in a really hard time. When were you there for me? Or I set the boundary and take space for 2 weeks when you haven't talked to me in 2 months. And then after I don't respond to a text message, you unfollow me and lose my location. Or I'm in the hospital and you don't even care. And I was still friends with that person for 8 months. Like, what am I doing? Like, what am I doing? And so I've really been sitting and facing all of that. And really the therapy session really opened my eyes to and I had to revisit it. Like, I had to kind of revisit these topics like 2 or 3 times. And he kind of really ripped the Band-Aid off of like, you don't have to take care of the people around you, especially if they aren't taking care of you. And what was even more scarier to me is that like, I didn't see that. Is I still was putting the responsibility on myself. I'm like, oh, well, there's so much happening in the world. We need community. And I've been preaching that. Talk to your fucking neighbor. Talk to the people around you. Like, talk to your barista. Talk to your server. Like, say hi to your delivery driver if it's not a sketchy energy. Because if you're a girl, if you know, you know. And I don't want to take men out of that. But like, for women, you know what I'm saying there. But anyway, and so that really overtook me too, of like, well, this is a really scary time. This is a time in history that, is really unknown. And I think we're facing the unknown. And my dog is pulling my laptop charger. I think we're facing the unknown in a way that we've never faced before. And so to feel really isolated and lonely during this time is also pretty terrifying. But I also can't that doesn't outweigh disrespect. That doesn't outweigh being manipulated. That doesn't outweigh being used in a need and then being thrown away when that need isn't there or there isn't an emergency. And that was really hard for me to deal with. That was really hard for me to let go of and to face, because I didn't want to. I didn't want to face that I was that I was doing it all. And I think too, when you face those emotions with yourself, I think it's really understandable to have a lot of anger and to have a lot of shame, and to even do what I was saying at the beginning of like, well, something's wrong with me. Like, if I'm doing all this and I don't see it, like, something has to be wrong with me. Real stuff. I think all of those feelings are coming up, and I think I've kind of making this video too to ground myself in that, like, it's okay. It's okay. And everybody who I've talked to about this is like, well, your 20s are supposed to be like that. You can lose all of your friends in your 20s. And I was almost say that I think what I'm going through right now is constant. This doesn't just happen in your 20s. This happens for your whole goddamn life. This doesn't stop. Like, they tell you it gets better after high school. Like, no, you just have to like start paying your own bills and still do the same thing. Like, you have to, this is constant life. And I think sometimes that can be discouraging, but I'm going to look at the glass half full, and that like you have to get comfortable with like being uncomfortable with yourself. You have to get comfortable with facing the parts of yourself that you're avoiding. And they say, oh, if you're avoiding something, then you're, not changing it, or you're comfortable with staying where you're at. And I think that's like really hard and another really shameful way to look at this, because it's like, if we're going to crap on ourselves every single time that we feel like we've done something wrong, or that we didn't take care of ourselves, then we're just repeating the same cycle. And I think that is also a huge part of the problem, because shame is such an inhibitor. And I think in restorative work, we talk about that a lot. Like, I think restorative work can be really punitive and can say, well, you were wrong, you did blah, 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 and you should be ashamed of yourself. We live in a very shameful society, especially in America. And so I think it's really important to understand that like life lessons last a lifetime, and that the work that goes into them, you don't just one and done. You don't just get over it. Like, this is constant work. Like, this will be an endeavor forever. And I think that grounds me to know that you do always have the time to figure it out. That I don't need to know the answer today. That I can just accept. That I tried my best for myself, and I have so much time to figure it out, and endings are new beginnings. You clear out the old, make room for the new. And now I know. Now I fucking know. And thank God. Because now I can do something different. And I think it's always trial and error. Not to say the next time I'm going to be perfect. But maybe I'm not going to spend 6, 8, 4 years in these friendships giving myself away. Maybe next time it'll only take 2. Maybe next time it's only going to take 6 months. Maybe next time it's going to take till the first hangout and I realize, oh shit, And I think it makes me ponder, like, okay, then like, what is equality? What is a quality friend? Because nobody's perfect either. People might be, self-aware and like meet you where you're at in another part, but then somebody might not all the way feel like meet you where you're at. Like, I hung out with a friend of mine recently, and like they were super self-aware of like me driving, and like I didn't have to ask them for gas money. I didn't have to ask them to like take care of things in that regards around finances, or just like being self-aware enough to help me where they could. But then I felt like some comments they made were a little judgmental, and I'm like, okay, like, let's acknowledge that. And like, not everybody is perfect. Like, there's still good in this person, but I'm just going to maneuver this way now. And I'm not going to like have open arms in this way, like, so they're very ebbs and flows. And I think it's also important to remember that like relationships are fluid, that there isn't necessarily a right or wrong. And I think that's also how I try to ground myself. It's like, there isn't quote unquote the right way to be a friend. I think it's all about intention and letting yourself see that. And if I would have let myself see that, I think I would have seen that the people who I'm losing actually never had good intention. Maybe they were able to show up in a traumatic time, or maybe they were able to, fear bond or trauma bond or like be somebody in a time that I needed. But if your relationship is like based in like being isolated from the world, or like isolation for the two of you in your relationship, like red flag, oopsie, take it from me. I think, yeah, that is my video today, guys. So much love. Thank you for listening to my tangents. I definitely have more ideas of videos coming soon. So stay tuned. So much love. Please take care of yourself, and until next time.